welcome, Jamie, to the committee today. You have 10 minutes with us from Groundswell, so we'll hand it over to you for your opening remarks, but do take your submission as read.
Yep, okay, I'll just do some key points. So I'm the Groundswell environmental spokesperson. One of our key points is that the problem is not the forestry, and there's a lot of debate around forestry versus sheep and beef. And a key point that Groundswell want to make is that the problem is not forestry, and tinkering with the ETS, forestry regulations and that sort of thing is actually focused at the wrong issue. The problem is the Paris Accord or Paris Agreement. Now, what we've done in our submission is we've listed multiple detrimental outcomes. And we would note that all of those outcomes would not be an issue if we were not in the Paris Agreement. So a couple of key things with the forestry. There's a lot of debate about how much forestry has changed, whether it's increased or not. But what we're noticing with the Paris Accord and the ETS is the type of forestry is changing. So we're seeing around here on the Canterbury Plains forestry being converted to farmland. But what we're seeing in the hill country is a lot more extensive forestry than would have been ordinarily seen if we didn't have the ETS and the Paris Accord. Another one of those detrimental outcomes that we've mentioned is there was a research done by Beef and Lamb, 2.8 million hectares of native vegetation on sheep and beef farms. And I guess I would ask the committee, where do you think most of that 2.8 million hectares of native vegetation is on sheep and beef farms? What type of land? And if you look around here, Canterbury, even Marlborough, Otago, a lot of it's on LUC 6, 7 and 8 land, and it's on marginal land. And that's the land that is being promoted by the government to be planting forestry. What we're seeing, and I mean, I see this all the time because I work in the environmental space, we're losing thousands of hectares of native vegetation to forestry, both carbon and production forestry. And that's because any native vegetation under 5 metres is ascribed no value. It's actually a liability with legislation like SNAs. And so an example around here is that we lost one of the best stands of a native shrub, a native broom in Canterbury, and the farmer didn't realise, but the consultants promoted the planting of forestry because it was marginal land. It was scrub that didn't get more than 5 metres, so we lost that because there's no value. The other thing is that we're seeing, I saw a site where native shrubland was root raked and cleared and then planted in native trees because the scrub wouldn't reach 5 metres. Yeah. The final point is I'm not sure if the committee are aware of a proposal called NZ taxonomy, but it is going to be something that everyone will become quite aware of in the next few weeks as it unfolds. And essentially what NZ taxonomy is, it's a proposal that's come about from being in the Paris Agreement. And it classifies economic activities, and it has a huge impact on farming if it goes through. Now, when you look at this NZ taxonomy as we have in detail, it's extraordinary in terms of, I mean, it's breathtaking in terms of the conditions, the requirements and the impacts that it's going to have on our farming sector. The reason why we've got policies like NZ taxonomy coming through is because we're in the Paris Agreement. So what we're going to see, the longer as we stay in the Paris Agreement, the more we're going to see detrimental policies impacting New Zealand in so many different ways. And that's why Groundswell was saying we need to get out of the Paris Agreement. So our submission is that we support the intention to address these issues, but we think you're directing it the wrong thing. You need to address the Paris Agreement.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Look, we've got our first question from Mike Butterick.
Thank you, Chair. Jamie, Bryce, good afternoon. Jamie, I'm pleased that you do support the intention of this bit of legislation, but I just had a couple of questions for you. really after some comments. I see Federated Farmers, they've joined other industry groups in opposing a remit to exit the Paris Agreement, but they're citing economic and trade consequences. Have you got some thoughts on that?
Well, when you look at the likes of the NZ taxonomy proposal, and when you look at all of those detrimental outcomes that we've listed in our submission, we actually stand to lose a hell of a lot, and we already are losing a hell of a lot. So if this proposal goes through that you've got drafted in front of you, there's still going to be lots of unintended consequences from that proposal, and I guess you've probably heard about them over the last few days. And I think that just highlights the extraordinary mess we're in by being in the Paris Agreement. I think when Feds put that announcement out, they probably weren't completely aware of the NZ taxonomy proposal, but maybe you could ask them the question again now that this NZ taxonomy proposal is out in the public. So what we're seeing is that there's risks either way, but the risks at the moment that we're dealing with in so many different ways, we firmly believe that getting out of the Paris Agreement is the lesser of the two risks.
If I can supplementary. Thank you, Chair. Look, Jamie, and I have talked to you about this previously, but I'm a little bit alarmed as a sheep and beef farmer. You know, we're in a really good space at the moment, farming-wise and product price-wise, and the inherent risk of exiting, our free trade agreements, which do have specific clauses relating to emissions. And an example of that risk is, 12 months, 1st of May to 1st of May, the EU FTA created an extra $1 billion for this economy. That, in my mind, is at risk. And the other example I would use is, as a sheep farmer, our most lucrative markets for our product prices, the EU, the UK, sheep meat in 2024, the EU was $15,500 per tonne. The UK was $8,900 a tonne. Both of those have emissions reduction clauses in those free trade agreements, whereas China, our market value is $5,500. That's a massive risk, is it not, to our prices that we're getting?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, there's risks either way, but when you look at what's happening around in our community, and we're not as badly affected as up the East Coast of the North Island like you guys, but what we see happening around here now is farming families exiting the industry because of multiple pressures, and the Paris Agreement is one of those, and becoming even more so. I mean, this NZ taxonomy proposal was just another, I guess it's another nail in the coffin, particularly for the sheep and beef sector, because when you look at how that's drafted, it's hugely penalising for the sheep and beef sector. Our ability as sheep and beef farmers to reduce emissions, around here, we're already at a low baseline. We've got a lot of native bush on our farms that's not counted. There's so many inequities in this, and we're losing our farming families. And each farming family you lose is another nail in the coffin for the viability of our small rural communities. I mean, rural volunteer firefighters, all those other risks. So, yeah, there's risks either way, but whether it's an exit the Paris Agreement or whether it's a negotiation around agriculture and something that's around agriculture specifically, there's lots of variations of how you deal with exiting or partial exiting of the Paris Agreement. But ultimately, if we stay in it and stay in it linked to agriculture, it's bad news for New Zealand. It's bad news for us.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll just have time for one last question.
Thank you, Chair. Look, just Jamie, and look, I don't disagree that our rural communities are very special places, and rural people contribute to a whole lot of community good, such as firefighting and all the rest of it. But in terms of, some of the pressures as sheep and beef farming has been, number one, profitability. And, we're in a really good spot right now, record product prices, all on the back of those lucrative markets that do have those clauses in those agreements. That profitability is at risk, and that would be just one comment. And the other one is the other driver in terms of land use change has been the ETS settings, that favour one sector over the other, which this bill is hoping to change to get rid of that anomaly, if you like, or the skewing of the scrum. What are your comments around that?
Again, you're tackling the wrong thing here. And I mean, I've read through the bill and it's just making it more complicated. I mean, this ballot and permit system for LUC 6 land, it's just, yeah, and you know, you're going to push more forestry into 7 and 8 land, and that's where a lot of our native vegetation is. That's you know, aesthetic values. It's huge problems with weeds and pests when you see the forestry. Small blocks weren't so much an issue, but when you get these bigger blocks, and that's the change, bigger blocks of forestry, carbon forestry, the problem with weeds and pests now. So I mean, certainly Groundswell's view, you're aiming at the wrong thing here. It's the Paris Agreement and the policies that flow from that. It's the whole ETS, it's your climate change policies, it's your targets, it's all of that comes back to being in the Paris Agreement. And we're saying join the dots and look at what's causing all of this.
Look, thank you very much, Jamie and Bryce. We are going to have to leave it there. We've met time today, but appreciate your comments and insight. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.